Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. My name is Zach Russo, and I will be presenting my capstone thesis paper, From the Ground Up, Fostering Environmental Sustainability at the Local Level. Uh, our time is relatively short, so I'm going to provide as solid of an overview as I can, and we'll dive right in. So first thing, why did I choose this topic? For those who may not know, this paper focuses on the climate crisis and on efforts, one in particular, to help mitigate it. Climate change will probably be the defining issue of my lifetime. The only thing that I can possibly think of that could possibly rival it is the onset of AI. That said, I felt it was really important to take this opportunity to learn more and to give this topic the attention it deserves, especially from the vantage point of a more climate vulnerable region like Long Island, which is where we're going to be focusing. While there is certainly a larger global threat here, we're really focusing the bulk of our attention on just one organization, one place. That place is, again, my hometown, the town of Babylon. The town is a municipality located towards the southern end of central Long Island, New York. It's in Suffolk County, one of two counties on Long Island, and in and of itself encompasses a wide variety of smaller communities. It was established in 1872, and according to the 2020 US Census, its population is 218,233. As you'll see in one of the graphics here, it is essentially surrounded by bodies of water. So what does the town of Babylon do? What is it responsible for? Well, it's a local government like many others, and its diverse objectives are encapsulated in the town's mission statement, which, as you'll see, is, quote, to provide quality services and facilities to the people of the town of Babylon in a professional, courteous, and cost-effective manner, unquote. So these people are the town's primary stakeholders, as they're the ones who currently live in this community, receive its services and privileges, and are subject to its policies and the powers it possesses. The people at the helm of this government and those providing and or supporting these services are also stakeholders, from the town supervisor to the town council members and beyond. So now let's discuss the overarching problem, or rather the threat. Climate change can be defined simply as, quote, long-term changes in temperature and precipitation patterns, unquote. The literature stressed that the degree to which human beings have an impact on these changes has grown over the course of the past 150 years or so, following the onset of the Industrial Revolution of the late 18th century. These changes are driven by the generation and emission of greenhouse gases, most prominently carbon dioxide and methane, which mostly stems from the burning of fossil fuels like coal or oil. As the amount of greenhouse gases emitted into the atmosphere increases, more heat, more energy from the sun is trapped within the atmosphere. And this extra heat contributes, quote, to higher surface temperatures on our planet. Higher temperatures tend to have various negative implications for nature and humans, including more severe droughts, floods, extreme weather events, and sea level rise, end quote. So this should have been setting off alarm bells long ago, right? And certainly today, as we're already grappling with maintaining human security and avoiding economic damage. As Susan Clayton puts it, quote, climate change is happening. We are already seeing the effects in terms of heat waves, hurricanes, flooding, wildfire, and drought. Less visible, but ultimately even more important, are the slower changes in average temperature, sea level, and patterns of precipitation that will characterize our climate in the decades to come, unquote. So what do we do about this? As I mentioned earlier, we certainly have to at least talk a great deal about it, but we also have to act more on it. My paper highlighted some actions that are being taken at the highest level of government and diplomacy, from the negotiation of the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement to the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act by a Democratic Congress and President Biden. But it didn't pretend to have all the answers. Rather, it presented a local solution to an enormous challenge, a solution that will supplement these greater actions while also fostering a culture of environmental sustainability. So the key to the solution in question is this: compost, specifically the implementation of community compost programs. As Hugh describes it, quote, composting is the natural process of recycling organic matter, such as leaves and food scraps, into a valuable fertilizer that can enrich soil and plants, end quote. The literature is just unanimous in its characterization of compost as a boon to agriculture, with both Kemper and Morrow and Davies describing it as gold for gardeners and food producers. It's also just a great way to prevent waste. For our purposes, though, it's important to consider where these items usually end up, which is a landfill. Hugh elaborates that, quote, landfills are the third largest source of human-generated methane emissions in the United States, end quote. A 2021 article in the Washington Post shared a similar statistic and notes that, quote, the carbon footprint of US food waste is greater than that of the airline industry, end quote. While this is not the only activity through which greenhouse gases are emitted, reducing the extent to which this takes place would be extremely valuable in combating climate change. The value of mitigating this would only increase as more communities and more individuals within those communities sought out composting as an alternative to traditional garbage collection. So under the program that I'm proposing, approved matter, food scraps in this case, would be collected by households and deposited in bins that are separate from other garbage and recyclable items. From there, the town would collect these bins in a manner that is somewhat similar to the collection of other categories of waste items, but using their contents in such a way that allows for them to be composted, and in so doing, helping to eliminate waste and contribute positively to a sustainable future rather than inhibit it for town residents, other communities, and the planet. This will, additionally, further encourage other local governments to take this step through a sort of domino effect and encourage residents to develop a sense of both individual and community purpose and responsibility on this front. In the process, the town will send the message that it is invested in residents' well-being, and simultaneously, that we're all stakeholders in the fight for a sustainable future, a fight that must be pursued not only from the top down, but from the ground up. Addressing climate change is not something most people think about every day, right? But it's something that has definitely been included in public policy conversations, and it's being included more and more over the past decade or so. And I will say it was interesting to actually come across a study that showed how there was actually a slightly higher rate of increase over time in those who believed that local officials ought to do more about global warming than there was in those who felt the same even about Congress. Action taken at lower levels of government may not have as large of an impact as some taken at the federal level, but they can still make a difference and simultaneously help spur an environment in which additional pressure is generated toward those who do have the most power to affect climate resilience and sustainability. Just as victory gardens in the last century supplemented wartime rations, boosted morale, and created a collective goal, a community composting program serves as another example of meeting an extraordinary moment with the united front. Now, there was a robust discussion of the classics of public administration that were incorporated into the paper's literature review, but tonight I'll focus on the contrast made between just two of those. H. George Frederickson famously advocated for a new public administration, one that builds on the principles of efficiency and economy and adds, as a third pillar, equity. Now, this isn't representative of a complete break from Woodrow Wilson, whose foundational piece was adamant in the idea that the public sector should be well managed, but it does perpetuate the argument that public administration as a field shouldn't just leave values at the door. Quote, new public administration seeks not only to carry out legislative mandates as efficiently and economically as possible, but to both influence and execute policies which more generally improve the quality of life for all, end quote. Put another way, this isn't just about management of government. It's about our personal and generational legacies. Such an approach fits in with utilitarianism, an ethical theory under the umbrella of consequentialist ethics that advocates for actions that lead to the greatest happiness or welfare for the greatest number of people. So now let's zoom back in on Babylon. Further understanding an organization and how it operates is key to making progress within it, as we all know. In terms of how the town goes about getting things done, It depends in no small part on the work of the town supervisor and the town council, the latter of which consists of 4 elected council members. When the town government while the town government extends far beyond these figures into various departments, the figure that you're seeing here, which was included in chapter 3 of the paper, offers an outline of how the council does its important work, broken down into 4 steps that demonstrate how things are passed and how things are ultimately put into effect. Introduction of a proposal, public hearing, a vote by the town council, and ultimately enforcement. Additionally, the town is driven by data decision-making, tracking complaints and concerns, while also being able to track how they are addressed. The next chart that you see here covers the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats faced by the town of Babylon, both generally and within the context of this innovation. I'll single a few out now, and I'm happy to go back later on and go through this a little more thoroughly if anyone has any questions. But again, just to single a few out here, a strength of Babylon is its financial standing, as it feels very secure economically, even post-COVID. That seems to be the consensus among its officials. A weakness is that the public sector, and certainly entire governments, is designed to move at a more deliberative pace. Babylon has the opportunity here, of course, to be proactive rather than reactive in mitigating the impacts of climate change on our region, but it should be mindful of the threat that we cannot simply just pretend that this isn't an issue and go about our business as usual. Additionally, it will have to win over the participation, and for that matter, the hearts and minds of its residents. The concept for the program itself was introduced earlier, but let's review the main aspects of what its implementation would entail. The larger paper includes a timeline that begins in summer 2023 and extends through most of 2025. The tail end of 2023 is when appeals for approval would be made to the town council, and 2024 is when best practices and additional funding opportunities would be researched. But it's the last year that we're really going to focus on right now. This period of about 8 or 9 months in 2025 could be broken down into 3 categories that overlap to some degree. The first phase is education, then comes the introduction phase, and finally, evaluation. Under education, it is the town's job as an organization to notify town residents of the program's upcoming introduction, bring them up to speed on just what a composting program entails, convince them, or at least a large slice of them, to participate, and educate and train those who are enrolled about what they will need to do to participate properly. This will be done all while the town is putting the finishing touches on its own preparation work, including updates to its website. Next up will be the introduction, which is where implementation truly hits the pavement. Registered town residents will, at home, collect as many or as few food scraps as they would like. Bring these food scraps to the predetermined, secure local site that is the most convenient to them, and these bins would later be picked up. Enrollees will receive a code to access the food scrap bins at these sites, which will be locked up to prevent the attraction of animals and to protect the integrity of the bin's contents and make sure that there isn't anything going in there that shouldn't be. From there, these bins would be collected and the areas cleaned on a regular basis, with their contents brought to a composting facility such as Long Island Compost. So after several months of this, evaluation of the program would officially commence, in which evaluators would consider 3 major variables: the number of pounds of solid waste collected at each site per week, the total number of pounds of solid waste collected across all drop-off sites, and the total number of registered individuals and households participating in the program. The total pounds figure can, in turn, be used to estimate the amount of greenhouse gases prevented from emanating into the atmosphere, and evaluators could also determine the costs and benefits of the program. These findings would be compared to preliminary goals and then shared with local leaders so that the program's future can be determined, as well as with neighboring communities so that they could be advised on lessons learned. In addition to these discussions of implementation and evaluation, this portion of the paper considered other factors as well, including a list of key players and funding. I want to take a moment to discuss the latter in particular, as I think that this strengthens the case for feasibility and includes some great financing opportunities. The cost of this project, up until the point that has been scheduled at least, is approximately $776,500. And even if one were to round up to make the program cost $1 million, that would still only be just over 0.5% of Babylon's 2023 adopted budget. And if Babylon's experience is anything like the city of Kingston's, as they are currently implementing a program that has helped devise the one presented here, diverting food scraps to a composting facility rather than a landfill has the potential to cost the town considerably less money, which offsets our grand total. And you can get an idea of exactly the figures that Kingston is looking at on this slide here. Additionally, a variety of grants exist that could greatly alleviate the price tag, including the Climate Smart Communities Grant from the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation and the New York State Municipal Waste Reduction and Recycling Program. The first is a competitive matching grant program, while the second helps cover recycling coordinator salaries and public education programs. As Jon Snow might say in Game of Thrones to a group of warring factions about the threat of an advancing army of undead White Walkers, there's only one war that matters, and it is here. The threat of climate change is our one war, and we have the opportunity to fight for a future in which those who come to bear our names don't feel compelled to curse them. So this program is not designed to achieve that by itself. After all, if you're jumping out of an airplane, even if you're diligent in making sure that there are no little holes in your parachute, you're going to be in trouble if big holes go unaddressed. Such a community composting program is designed first and foremost to try and help seal up those smaller holes by cutting down on waste, recycling food scraps, and in the process, decreasing methane emissions. But it's also designed to make sure that we are prepared and willing as individuals and as a society to address those bigger holes in the parachute. And indeed, that we are interested in making sure that there is a parachute at all. So let the lesson of this thesis be that in public administration, and certainly in this context, safety, strength, and resilience are not foregone conclusions that can be achieved without proactive action. No one is coming to rescue us. We must rescue ourselves. Through this innovation, Babylon can help lead the effort in fostering environmental sustainability from the ground up, not just through its actions, but through the culture it seeks to build for itself, for its neighbors, and for those to come. It's been my privilege to speak to you tonight about my work. Thank you all for listening to this capstone presentation. Thank you, guys.